Welcome to Clotheshorse, the podcast that loves denim, but hates, seriously, just like hates jeans. I get the rest of you like them, but it's just really complicated, okay? I'm your host, Amanda, and this is episode 208. My guest this week is Sarah, the owner, the designer, all of the things behind Deco Denim. We're not really here to talk about denim this week per se. So if you're looking for some great and, well, to be honest, very depressing facts and information about denim, I recommend you go back to the incredibly comprehensive denim series I did early on in Clotheshorse with denim designer Michelle. Start with episode 11. You will never look at jeans the same way again. And honestly, that's why I've never done another episode about denim specifically, because Michelle just nailed it and gave us a lot of really good information. So go listen to that if you haven't. So if this isn't about jeans and denim, then what is this episode about? Well, it's more about what it's like to work within the fashion industry and what it looks like to leave it or operate outside of it. Let's say that. One of the questions I receive via email and DM most often is, I feel stuck in the fashion industry or retail. I really want to escape. How do I do it? And, I'm going to level with you. There's no easy answer there. So what I've been trying to do this year is from time to time feature different people who made that transition and what it was like for them. One thing I have learned as I talk to others about their experiences leaving the industry is that the path out may be different for each of them, but it's always kind of scary and definitely not easy. Lessons will certainly be learned the hard way for many of us who decide to make a big change like that. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't happen. And actually, it's important to not let that fear keep you trapped. And I say that as someone who was trapped by fear for a really long time, and it had an extremely negative effect on my mental health. While today's episode really focuses on leaving the fashion industry, it can apply to any career path you have been following. I still think it's crazy that we are, in theory, expected to figure out what we want to do for the rest of our lives when we are in our late teens and early 20s. What? I have been so many different Amandas since then. I'm sure you have been so many different versions of yourself as well. And furthermore, data suggests that the average person will change careers. This kind of blew my mind, actually. Are you ready? 5 to 7 times during their working life. And I'm not saying jobs, 5 to 7 jobs. I'm saying careers. So if you feel like you are ready for a change for the first time or even once again, hopefully my conversation with Sarah will inspire you to get out there and do something different. Even though change is super scary and often difficult, and yeah, like I said, many lessons learned the hard way. I could share lessons I've learned the hard way over the past few years alone with you. It would be like a 3-episode series probably. But learning is kind of one of life's greatest joys, even when it's a difficult lesson, right? So hopefully, even if you're like, I love my job, I love what's going on in my life, you might still be inspired to hear what Sarah has done over the past few years. I do want to call out, it's not really deeply, we don't go into this too deeply at all, but we are going to talk about alcoholism a little bit, and we're going to talk about my own struggles with food and, my eating disorder and how it intersected with my job. I don't think that we don't go into it a lot, but we will mention it here and there, just as an FYI. So if that's not something you want to hear at all, then maybe just skip this episode and, wait until next week or go listen to that awesome denim series. Before we jump into my conversation with Sarah, let's talk about merch for a minute, specifically Clotheshorse merch. So many of you have been asking for Clotheshorse merch for years, and it's an issue I've turned over and over in my mind. by now, you know how I feel about merch and promo tees. And if you don't, I've been doing a very bad job of making this podcast, but I don't love it, right? I think that it's a type of overconsumption that is also fast fashion, but people don't see it that way. They see it as a different category of stuff. But I mean, like, how many band tees and podcast tees and tote bags and whatnot does one person really need, right? I didn't want, and I don't ever honestly want to be making more stuff for the landfill. I mean, that goes against everything I believe in. And I'll tell you, there are companies that print podcast merch on demand, paying a cut to the podcasters. Certainly, I have been reached out to many, many times by some of these companies, and I've had to finally lay down the law with them and please take me off your list. I'm not interested. I will say for many shows, it's a revenue stream that is more successful than Patreon or subscriptions because it's really difficult to get people to pay for content. And it's something that I have been just banging my head against the wall about for years now. And there have been many times where it has made me feel just such an epic failure, like I'm bad at what I do. And I have to recognize and come to peace with the fact that people's willingness to support Clotheshorse financially is not necessarily a reflection of me or its quality. It's just the world we live in. And, the world we live in right now is really difficult financially, right? So, like I said, there are a lot of podcasts who are making merch for every episode practically, and they're getting it printed on demand by these companies. And no judgment against these creators because the struggle to get paid for your work is real. And as I mentioned, it has definitely made me feel sad and hopeless at times. I didn't want to go down that road, and I still won't, because I know that those merch companies don't have values that align with mine, right? So after so much thinking and research, you have no idea how many conversations and Google rabbit holes and conversations we've had with other people in the merch world, and just Dustin and I bouncing ideas off of one another, and so much. After so much of that, I've decided to offer iron-on transfers that you'll be able to use on secondhand tees, bags, whatever fabric thing you have lying around. My thinking was that by adding a transfer to one of those items, it might get even more wear and use and stay out of the landfill even longer. So if you do buy one of these transfers and you buy a new t-shirt to put it on, just don't tell me, but promise me that if you do that, that you will take really good care of it and wear it for a really, really long time. Okay, so let me just tell you about this merch. The iron-on transfers, which by the way, you can apply with an iron at home. We have tested this thoroughly. I was kind of shocked by how easy it was and how great the transfers look, because my only experience with iron-on transfers has either been at the Jersey Shore, where they have a huge heat press. And to be fair, as long as you didn't put those things in the dryer, they would last forever. I used to get a new t-shirt every summer when I was a kid, when we would go to the beach, often with a kitten, sometimes with glitter or a unicorn. And it would be my prized possession for the next year, right? So I knew that those existed and could be really high quality. The only other iron-on transfers that I'd seen for use at home, with an iron, were things you would print out on your computer, on your home printer, and then apply, and they never looked really good. But fortunately, the technology has gotten really, really good there. And once again, I can't believe how great these transfers look. They're printed in the US using a technology called direct to film. It's being done by a company named Ninja Transfers. I even checked the Glassdoor reviews for this company to ensure that they weren't a bunch of jerks, because I didn't want to support someone like that. Fortunately, the reviews were good. It seems like a good place to work, way better than places I've worked. So good job, everyone. Like I said, these transfers are really high quality. They're soft. They're really durable. You can easily iron them on with a home iron. And anybody who does order, you'll receive instructions with your order. Once again, it was so easy. I was pleasantly surprised. And you can also cover existing screen prints. So if you have a gross tee that your job gave you or something, here's a chance to cover it up and make it something special, which Wow, that's like a really heartwarming story. Actually, if any of you do that, you have to send me before and after photos so I can be really excited about it. So those are the iron-on transfers. The stickers, we added some stickers as well because people were asking for that, just like it's a lower price and a way people can support Clotheshorse. They're printed in the US by a company called Sticky Brand. And they use eco-solvent ink in their facility that runs off of 100% carbon-free and 78% renewable energy. They repurpose all their excess materials into artwork and clothing, and the company plans to transition to zero landfill waste by the end of this year. That's amazing. Like, that's a company who shares my values. And the stickers are made to stand up to weather, the dishwasher, the sun. I wanted you all, if you were going to stick this on something you own, to have it for a long time. So those are the stickers. That said, there is no such thing as a purchase without impact, right? I did my best to mitigate it, but no purchase is ever going to be perfect. Both items, the iron-on transfers and the stickers, can include plastic. Most screen print inks and stickers contain plastic. Furthermore, we can't forget the shipping and the packaging, although I am solely trying to thrift the packaging to ship these orders out to everyone. But that said, there's still a shipping, right? There's still a little plastic. This stuff could end up in a landfill if you don't take care of it and keep it out of the dryer and follow the laundry instructions and all those things. So I just want you to, like all purchases, like I'm always telling you, to think really carefully before you buy it. So all this stuff is up for pre-order now, and it has been up for a couple weeks. That pre-order is going to end on August 1st, which is in just a few days. And then everything will ship out as I receive them. Stickers will still be available after the pre-order ends. I'm not so sure about the transfers and if they will be coming back. Just to be completely honest with you all, they're kind of expensive, so I don't want to order a ton extra because then I'll just be losing money. So depending on how many orders we get for pre-order, they might be available in the future. They might not be, but pretty much the more pre-orders I get, the more likely I am to order more transfers in the future or even make new transfers in the future. Right now, it's still kind of TBD for me based on the sales. Anyway, you can use the link in the show notes to go place your order today. Or you can just go to clothehorsepodcast.com with like muscle memory or whatever and click on shop. All that stuff is there. And I'll just add, if the fact that I'm doing this disappoints you or makes you want to stop listening, I totally understand. This was not a decision made lightly, and there were many stress stomach aches along the way. I almost backed out about 25 different times. It feels really weird to me. But the reality that I also have to accept is that I've done thousands of hours of work for free over the last few years, and I'm just trying to cover some of the expenses of bringing information and education to all of you. Nothing has made me more aware of the amount of labor and time I give to this community every week than transitioning to working for myself and billing by the hour. There are definitely times when I'm working on an Instagram post for 2 hours or answering questions or helping with someone with a school project. You would be shocked to hear how many school projects I've helped with over the past few years. There's times when I'm doing something like that when I'm kind of reminded, like, I should really be working for money right now. I'm trying to keep the balance there. My hope is that the merch will take off some of that pressure where I'm not like, oh my God, I still need to work 8 more hours of paid work today in order to like make it work. And it's like midnight and I'm just like at my computer fretting. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe the merch thing will come and go as, a lot faster than it was developed. We'll see. But maybe it'll be great too. Once again, you can check all that out at clothehorsepodcast.com in the shop thing. It's in the top nav. Well, okay, that's all I want to say about merch. It gets boring, right? Let's get down to the main event. Let's meet Sarah. Sarah, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
My name is Sarah Mattis. I am the founder of Deco Denim. I'm based in San Francisco, and I am very enthused about sustainable fashion, ethical fashion, gender fluid fashion, size inclusivity, All the things.
These are all the good things. So I'm glad to hear that. It would have been really awkward if you were like, I'm really into Shein and clothes made of plastic and one size fits all. Imagine.
Yeah. Oh God.
I'd be like, okay, how are we going to unpack that? So you obviously you have your own business. Could you just tell everybody like briefly like what you do with Deco Denim? Because people hear that they probably think you're making tons and tons of jeans and jean jackets and I don't know, like your Levi's or something. Not the first time Levi's is going to come up today. You just tell us a little bit like what you make.
Yeah, so I set out to make jeans and jackets, and I soon realized that in order to do it properly, that it just takes a long time
Uh-huh.
with other hurdles that came about along the way. But I launched with tote bags, and I made them and continue to make everything in LA, and with all of the like what we would call scrap or extra excess fabric. I made zipper pouches,
Mm.
and I have sold some t-shirts and indigo dyed hoodies and aprons as of late, and I'm set to hopefully get jeans and jackets off and running by around September of this year.
That's amazing because just in my experience as a buyer, jeans are the hardest of any item to get right. Like they're the hardest.
Yeah. They really absolutely are. And it's not just because like even off of my fit model, which is my husband, it been hard just to perfect that fit, but it needs to be democratic in that it can
Mm-hmm.
fit as many people as possible. You're never going to be able to fit everyone. It's just never going to happen. But
Mm-hmm.
if you can at least get like a good, like, amount of people, then that would be great.
Yeah, I mean that alone is a major victory. Denim. I mean, I don't wear jeans, and I think it's partially because I'm just too traumatized from having to buy jeans as a buyer. It's really, really hard. So you didn't just one day wake up and decide like, okay, I'm going to make stuff out of denim. I'm going to try to create literally the most difficult item to create. You actually have had a career in fashion. So I was just wondering, this is the same question I ask everyone who has worked in fashion. I get asked this myself all the time. Did you always think that this is what you were going to do with your life? Or did it just happen to you?
Yeah, I mean, had you asked like 7-year-old me, it would have been, no, I'm going to be a veterinarian. But no, as I
Classic.
got, right? As I got older, and I graduated high school, I really didn't know what the heck I was going to do. And I was kind of in a bad space. I was drugging and drinking, and finally the question presented itself: like, what do you want to do? You need to get out of
Hmm.
here. And this was my mom, and I was like, oh, I want to go into culinary school or fashion school, and I just kept thinking back, like my whole life, I was always so into clothing and, doing those back to school shopping trips with my mom at
Hmm.
Mervyn's, rest in peace.
I
And
loved Mervin's.
I loved Mervyn's so much. It was the best. And yeah, so I just always had a thing for fashion, and it just so happened that the Academy of Art University in San Francisco didn't require you to submit a portfolio. They didn't care about your grades, and I was like, hey, that's me. Like I could do this. And so, and that's just like, sure, it's easy to get in, but it was so hard once I got there because I didn't know anything about sewing or drawing or, nothing. And so I stuck with it and found out that I really kind of excelled at doing these things. And by excel, I mean like I was able to get things done. I wasn't like top of class or anything. And you know, I just like stuck with it and interned in New York at Lamb, which was Gwen Stefani's fashion line once upon a time. And, it just like I found that I had this like persistence and perseverance that just kind of propelled me forward. Like I wasn't going to give up. And
Mm-hmm.
um, graduated and then couldn't find a job to save my life because it's San Francisco and this is not one of the fashion hubs.
True.
Like there
Yeah.
are places, but like there's not a lot of them. And what jobs there are, there is a whole lot of competition. And
Yeah.
so I found myself working at Nordstrom and uh, in the savvy section selling of one brand's, lamb of, which was kind of funny. And then I was like, I gotta get into a temp agency. And I did. I joined a temp agency that was specific to fashion. And then the jobs started rolling in. And I was like, okay, all right, this isn't ideal, but it's better than working at Nordstrom, I suppose. So, and then I just kept applying to places on my own. And I got a interview with Levi's. And um, long story short, I got the gig, and it was my dream job. Like I had always loved Levi's. I loved the history. I
Mm-hmm.
always wore jeans, and so I was like, "This is it. I have arrived."
Like it's interesting to think about like working in fashion in San Francisco. I was like, as you were talking, I was sort of mentally, going through like where could you work? You could work at Levi's. You could work at the
Yeah,
Gap. Is that it?
yeah.
I guess nowadays you could work at Stitch Fix, although I think they just laid off a bunch of people. Or you could work at Dolls Kill, which I'm not sure if you're
Oh,
super
yeah.
okay. All I'll say is all the worst people that I worked at Nasty Gal, like the most toxic people, they work there now.
Oh, it
And
says a lot.
I know. And I know it's like says so much. Yeah. I mean, you talking about like the lack of options in San Francisco just made me think of, and I think this is going to be more important as you talk about your experience working at Levi's. I started my career in Philadelphia working for Urban Outfitters as a buyer. And here's the thing. Once you start working as a buyer or designer or anything fashion related for Urban Outfitters, suddenly you live in Philly. Maybe you buy a house. I didn't make enough money for that, but some people do. And you're like, oh, wow. So here's the deal. If I ever want to not work here, I got to get a job at one of the sister brands, Free People or Anthropologie, or now Newly, which is going to be really impossible because there's like a lot of weird internal competition. It's going to be really hard to get transferred to another brand, or I have to pack up and go live somewhere in another city because that's it. That's all. You're like kind of stuck, and I feel like it has to feel that way in San Francisco too.
Absolutely. Yeah. The whole idea, once I, got my bearings and realized that the running joke was that in order to move up in the org, you either had to like your boss had to die, you had to you had to leave and then
Mm-hmm.
come back, um or like it was just like that was really kind of it. Like there weren't many options. They didn't really open up spaces, slots in the org chart. If anything, as soon as I got hired, they were talking about layoffs because this was 2008 and this
Yeah.
was, like recession. And so, yeah, there weren't many options. And so it was a coveted role and you wanted to stay there as long as you possibly could, um, in fear of exactly what you said, like, oh, to move to New York, move to LA, like, oh, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you, like, even if you move to LA, like, there are more companies there, but most of them are horrible. And when Nasty Gal went out of business, I was like, okay, great. So here are my options. I can work at Forever 21, which is notoriously horrible. I can work for Guess, which is notoriously horrible. I can work for BCBG, notoriously horrible. Most people in the LA fashion scene have worked at one of those. That's where they began their career. They're like meat grinders, kind of just breaking people down. And then it's like, okay, I could go work at Ross or like, I don't even like random small like brands where there'll be no job security. Like it seems like this is like a bigger industry than it really is. You know,
Yeah.
and people hold on to their jobs until like, I mean, I felt like at Urban, you'd get pushed out for being too old after a while, which is also like really terrifying. Um, but it's really hard to grow in the fashion industry without like moving around to a lot of different jobs. And at the same time, like there aren't a lot of places to move around to. So sometimes you get stuck in these like really, I don't know, toxic, less than ideal situations because there's nowhere else to go.
Yep.
I
Absolutely. Yeah,
I I bet I'm
that's
sure there are times you felt kind of trapped because I did for sure.
yeah, I did. Once the honeymoon period kind of like faded, and I was left sitting, in a pool of my anxiety, which, I was, yeah, that was eye-opening. But it absolutely was like, well, I don't know what to do. I just gotta like do it. I gotta deal with it. I
Yeah.
have to quote unquote play the game. And I
Ugh.
was not good at playing the game. I was not good at the politics. Like
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted I yeah, I just don't do well with bullshit. I don't do well with,
Same.
like
Yeah.
fake nice. I don't do well with like it was just so icky and toxic. And like, I loved my boss. My boss was amazing. She was became almost like a mentor. She almost became more of a mentor. Like it almost got kind of motherly, which is like also not great for her or I. And they were trying to figure out ways to fire her, and
Oh,
they
classic.
were asking me a bunch of questions, and I was like, these are weird questions, and then I went on Christmas break, and they ended up firing, well, sorry, they didn't fire her because they couldn't find a reason to fire her. They laid her off, and she
Like, did they say like they
called me.
eliminated her position or some dumb shit like that? Yeah,
Exactly.
I know
That's
this way
exactly.
too well. Yeah.
Yeah. And meanwhile, 2 months prior or a month prior, they hired this other designer on the men's side, but she only had women's experience. And my boss like saw the writing on the wall. She's like, I don't trust her. She's
Mm-hmm.
like, she's here to get my job. And like meanwhile, like she was hired into these politics, but like she could just smell what was happening, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, sure enough, they laid her off, and she called me on during break, and I lost it, and they knew to do it while I was on break because they knew I was going to lose it. So yeah, it was really just kind of like all downhill from there, because then this new boss didn't like me because she didn't choose me, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
she inherited me. So she just like automatically had it out for me. And so what was already toxic became super toxic. And it was just like, I mean, oh. those days, and I know you've spoken of this before, where you like go to sleep with anxiety, dreading the next day, and then the morning of, you're like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, I don't want to go. And yeah, and it's just, yeah, it was the absolute worst.
Yeah, it's interesting because you like feel like as you move up the ladder too, that like somehow things will get better, that feeling of dread and despair will like go away. That like you
Hmm.
reach some point in your career where you don't have that anymore. And I got to tell you, like my experience is like it doesn't matter what your job title is or even how much they're paying you, you're going to get that feeling if it's a bad environment. And like my last job before the pandemic, well, even the job that I quit like a year ago, it was like I was inconsolable in the morning just that I had to like get up and go to work. Like I just couldn't get it together to go out there and smile and pretend that everything was okay. I think that was like the thing that was really exhausting me.
Yeah,
And
same.
it's
Yep.
just, we all find like different ways to cope with it. For me, like the way I would cope with it is like I would like not let myself eat food. I would get really controlling about eating and exercise because that made me feel like I had some control over my life. But for other friends, it was drinking or it was
Yeah.
drugs or Tinder hookups or over shopping or all kinds of things, right? Like there's this whole spectrum of behavior that really like permeates the fashion industry and I'm sure many other toxic industries and environments, but it's just so prevalent in the fashion industry because people are so stressed out.
Yeah, and that was me. Like when it came to how I would basically numb, is I was drinking. And I mean I had a drinking problem for like that predated this job, but it became so much worse. I mean, I was coming in, quote unquote functional, I guess people call it, but
Yeah.
like, I don't know how functional it was. I was like, I had the shakes and just
Oof.
like perpetual hangovers, and it was not good. It was not good. And like, getting too crazy at like work events and like
Oh,
it just
wow.
was, oh yeah, it was not a good look at all. So that didn't help matters, right? Like,
Right.
had I'd gotten my anxiety and undiagnosed ADHD like under wraps and not been a raging drinker, then maybe my experience could have been different. But I'm not discounting the toxicity that also existed. Like, both can be true.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting, like thinking about the drinking, like there's the partiness. I felt like, and I don't know if it was this way where you were working, but I felt like at some of my jobs, really, maybe all of them, like being out of control like that and like leaning on substance abuse to survive, along with like, or, leaning into your eating disorder as I was encouraged. Or, I mean, not maybe like no one explicitly said, like, oh, you should just drink a lot and you'll feel better. But like, there will be a lot of work parties. I worked places where we opened a bottle of wine at like 4 o'clock every day. Like there would, specifically at Urban Outfitters, when you talked about people getting out of control at like work events and stuff, I immediately thought of Urban, where people would be like wasted at the office, making out, losing their shoes. And it was like, we're at the office, but it was just like part of
Oh
working
God.
there. And you kind of had to go participate in it or you weren't a team player. So it's sort of like you can't win in a weird way. Like you have to be hurting yourself to succeed at these jobs. I know it sounds really grim, but that's how I felt. Like at my one job, like the creative director of the entire campus, all the brands wouldn't even look at you or acknowledge you if you were over a size 6. I mean, she's just like
Mm.
a horrible person who has a lot of her own issues, but like it was like, oh, well, good thing that like the way I cope with like being miserable and stressed out and having low self-esteem is by starving myself, because then someday she'll look at me in a meeting and hear me. Um,
Oh,
or like for my friends who were like leaning on drinking, it was like, well, good thing you like to drink because they're going to force us to drink as part of like a team event later this week. It was just like, I don't know. It was like silently encouraged to cope, to cope unhealthily with what it
yeah.
is to work at these jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, to cope, but also it's just very much a part of the culture that alcohol must be involved for there to be some sort of like social engagement, It's like team
Yeah.
building.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
like
no, it's true. Yeah, I dated this guy who worked in advertising, and I felt he was an alcoholic, is an alcoholic, and I felt so. I have so much empathy for him because, like, at his agency, like, there was just alcohol everywhere all the time. And it really was like Mad Men. Like, you have to drink in meetings and stuff like that. And I was like, how will he ever get better? Like, this would keep me up at night. I was like, he's never going to be able to stay sober as long as he works in the advertising industry. And I feel like fashion can be really similar that way, where it's just like part of the culture.
it is. It is like and beyond. Like it's not just even at the corporate level. I worked in a at a startup that it was worse. It was worse than
Oh, no,
even
startups are
at
worse.
Levi's.
Okay, so let's talk about
Oh,
Levi's for a couple more minutes and then we'll talk about the startup because I have so many thoughts there too. And your story is wild, but not unusual to me as someone who's worked in both corporate and startup environments. They're both people think one is better than the other. I don't know about that. But
yeah.
uh when you and I were prepping for this episode, you talked about some things that I was like, oh my God, yes, this is so true. And one was how competitive and non collaborative sort of different brands and departments within these corporate, like larger umbrella corporations are. Like for example, when I was at Urban Outfitters, like people who worked at Anthro would practically hiss at you when you walked by. Like you were not supposed to be friends with them or collaborate with them. And it was hyper competitive, or even like the men's team was super competitive with the women's team. Like you just couldn't like help each other. Like it was frowned upon.
Yeah, it was yeah, weird dynamics. Like I worked for the signature brand starting out, which is the value channel of Levi's. It's what was or is sold at Walmart and was at Kmart.
Hmm.
And while I was there for the inception of Denizen, and Denizen it depends on what Target you go to, is sold at Target. And
Oh, interesting.
so, yeah, they're doing this thing right now where they're putting a lot of just straight up red tab in Targets now. So I don't know
Huh.
if it's just a test or whatnot. But anyways, so we were, the redheaded stepchildren of the brand, I soon found out. So there wasn't a lot of cross communication with the other brands like Red Tab and Dockers, and it was put on your your list of things that you had to do each quarter was reach out to um, the assistant, if you were an assistant that worked in women's, and see what they were doing, and see if there's anything like that you could learn. And it was always very difficult to get that to happen. Emails left unanswered,
Hmm.
and then your boss might then reach out to their equivalent on the team, and then be able to like set up a meeting. And it just always felt like cards were played very close, because
Mm-hmm.
they were afraid you were gonna steal their idea, which at the end of the day, we couldn't do exactly what they were doing because then it would, cannibalize the brand, and that's just not part of what we're set out to do. But it just felt that way. It felt like they were keeping these secrets, and they weren't going to share, but also at the same time you're viewed as like less than. And
Mm-hmm.
occasionally you'd find someone that would be like cool with talking to you, and as time went on, we'd be invited to reviews every once in a while, and that was always like, ooh, is it happening? Are we going to be able to like talk to these people now? um, but for the most part, you'd find out information from your PM partners that would have better relationships with their, equivalents in these other brands. And so they'd find out things and be like, oh, well, Red Tab's doing this, and they would tell us. And so it was interesting. It was a weird dynamic for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a lot of that. It's really it's like I can't. It's like competition. I think everybody. This is what I think it is. I think that people are so afraid of losing their jobs because there aren't as many fashion jobs out there as it would seem, and sometimes it's like this job's not great, but the next option is even worse. Like I would think about that a lot at Nasty Gal, which was a very miserable place to work because I was like, well, at least I'm not at Forever 21. I mean, like that's how it works. And so people are so fearful of losing their jobs because there is not much job security in this industry. And actually, I was specifically talking about to a friend recently about Levi's, and she was like, "Well, you know how it is there. Like you'll only get to be there for a year at most, and then they'll put you on a PIP, and then you'll be gone in 3 more months after that." She's like, "It's literally like every one of my friends who's worked in design there in the past few years." And so it's like you're so fearful of getting in trouble, of losing your job, that you start to view everybody else as competition for keeping that job or a threat to keeping that job. And so you can't be nice anymore. It's because people
Yeah.
are desperate to keep their jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and like I said, like this was the recession. So like there were layoffs
Oof,
like
real bad.
crazy.
Yeah,
But what, the job security I had was that the value channel was booming
I
because
bet.
everyone wanted to spend less money on jeans. And it said, signature by Levi's. So this is like I'm saving money by buying these, pants versus these, So, um, we were lucky, quote unquote, in that our jobs didn't go away, and they kept us so lean anyways
Yeah,
that if they cut one of us, then they would have been in the weeds. So
yeah.
um, yeah, it was still very wild. I lasted 4.5 years before I was put on a PIP.
Wow. Wow, that's a long time. I feel like
Yeah.
from based on conversations I've had, and this is purely like I have no way of validating this, obviously, but it seems that in the past like 5 or 6 years, they've really sped up the process of like bringing people in and spitting them out. And there's like really high turnover. This is strictly just based on conversations I've had with people who have been in and out of that place or have friends who have been. It just is,
Yeah.
it sucks.
Yeah. I think that there's a combo of, if it's not a good fit, maybe they might speed up the process, like for both parties, right? They just see
Hmm.
that, like, hey, this is just not working, but they have no real, there's no merit to like just flat out firing someone. Then they go the PIP route, But
Hmm.
if and then they on the opposite, if someone's been there too long, they will also figure out ways to just like kick you out. And it also is kind of it's odd. It's like, well, we need fresh blood. We need
Yeah.
to revamp. Is kind of, I think, the thought process there, and it's yeah, long gone are the days of I mean, when I first started working there, I had a lot of lifers, we would call them,
Mm,
on our teams that had been there for like 25 years.
wow.
And they were there for so long that they actually were getting pensions when they left. Like
What?
that's, yes, that's
Wow.
how long they were there before they got rid of the pension system. And I just remember feeling so like jealous. Like here I am in
I'm
my 20s, but I was
jealous.
like jealous. I know, right? Like you
Yeah.
can't get a pension unless you work for the government these days, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it was wild, and I think for the sake, for the only reason that they were kind of like grandfathered into this pension system, that they couldn't be let go, because like, it's a lawsuit waiting to happen, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure. But yeah, so um
Yeah. Wow. I mean, you're totally right that there was this time when people could work for a lot of these companies for like most of their career, if not all, right? And that's like that is not something that millennials or Gen Z have the luxury of. A lot of younger Gen Xers as well. It's sort of like companies don't want you to work there forever anymore because you get too expensive, but they want the loyalty as if you will work there forever, which is interesting
yeah.
because you can't get both. And I a few years ago interviewed. This was during the pandemic after I lost my job. I interviewed to be a buyer at a restaurant supply company, and there's no doubt that I could have done the job. I mean, it's buying is like spreadsheets and math and critical thinking. But in the interview, there were two things that just kept coming up. One was like, why would you ever leave fashion? Which obviously you and I have many reasons why we would
Mm.
want to leave fashion. The other one was like, wow, you've worked for four different companies in 10 years. And I'm like, really? Like that's what it is to work now. And that is 100% what it is to work in the fashion industry, where companies keep going out of business or doing layoffs. There's no reward for sticking around. And honestly, when I got laid off from Newly at the beginning of the pandemic, it was because they eliminated my position for budget reasons.
Mm.
And at that point, I was overqualified for my job, but I would say like bare minimum, you would need at least 10 years of experience to have that title. And a few months later, they gave my job to someone else who had about 2 years of buying experience. And I was like, wow, this is the first time I feel like I've been like laid off because I'm old and expensive. Like I guess I've really achieved something in my life. I've now reached
Oh,
I'm too
gosh.
expensive to keep around, right? And I'm going to be replaced with someone who's going to cost less because they have less experience. But that is what it is to work in the fashion industry now. There is no job security and it's really stressful. So, what made you finally leave Levi's?
Well, I towards the end there, and things were getting funky. I made a huge mistake on a sundry detail sheet. It's just this like document that you create for every single style, and you plug in a code for this color burr and this color like shank button and all the thread colors and whatnot. And I put in a like um gosh, it's like this little burr that was like decorative. It wasn't like it was functional, but it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like a what a rivet looks like. And I apparently it was placed in all of the positions that of every pocket opening. And we would do sundry detail sheet reviews at every phase of, prototyping and then pre-production and production. And you would sit around with like merchandising and PM and everybody would go through so all of that is to say that, yes, I was the owner of the sheet. I made the mistake, but nobody else caught it. And it wasn't caught until like right before production. And I got put on a pip for it. And no warning, no, hey, like this was kind of a fuck up, like don't do it again. It was, here you go. And I just knew, like, by this point, you just know, when you get put on a pip, it is just a matter of time before you're going to be let go.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not letting them dictate when I'm going to go, even though they basically were by putting me on this tip. But I was going to be the one to say peace out. And
Right.
so I just like it. It was irrational because like I didn't have, a backup. But I just decided I'm doing it. And I put in my notice. And I stayed my 2 weeks, and then I was out. My boyfriend, who's now my husband, he was so not stoked. It was definitely something he did not agree with, but like I mentally was just like I was not in a good place.
Right.
And
Right.
if I was there 1 second longer, I used to joke that I was going to throw myself down the stairs or burn the place down. And like, there was no in between. I just had to like run
Right.
out of there without my hair on fire. So, yeah, so I left, and the next journey began.
And so this is okay. Well, before we move on to your next job, like I do like not, I hate toxic positivity, and I'm definitely not a toxically positive person at all. But do you think that there are important things you learned from that job that you use now in life, and what were they? I mean,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I like as like bad of an overall experience as I had, I met some of the most amazing people. And the things that I took away and learned and was, the things that were cultivated in me professionally, um, I think were absolutely hands down what kept me going in the direction that I have gone.
mhm.
Absolutely. I learned so much about denim. I learned so much about washes, and I learned so much about like color, and I was able to I was given the freedom to like create metal sundries, design them and stuff like that. And I say like given the freedom, like that's how they presented it to me, right? Like you're being given this freedom. It's like, no, we want you to do everything.
You just like nailed exactly what they would tell you, like in a performance review, though, or something. If they were giving you more responsibility or like a promotion, like this is just like too real for me. Like I feel like
Yes.
I mean. I was talking about this with someone else recently where I was like, working corporate in these corporate environments, it like fills, I don't know, it starts to sort of like drill into you like that kind of verbiage. Like you'll be like moving forward, things like that, like you would
Oh,
never said before, right? And then on top of that, there are certain expectations that you'll develop, right? It's like internal pressures that come from working in those environments, like that you have to respond to every email same day. and that, you know, like you have to be available anytime that someone needs something. Like the first couple of years I was working on Clotheshorse, I couldn't help it. I was operating with like that corporate mindset where if someone DM'd me at 10 o'clock at night, I felt like I had to respond to them right away. You know, like no matter, I had to be available all the time. And then I was like, wait a minute, like if I'm going to be like leading some fight against like this entire structure, then why would I be like playing by those rules anymore? But I feel like it gets into your head. I'm sure you find yourself using corporate speak or falling into these habits more often than you would like.
Yes, absolutely. Like I was just about to tell you that like one of the things that I took away that I love is process.
Oh, yeah, though that's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think like I learned a lot working in the corporate environment in the fashion industry that I still use with my clients now. And it's really important. And it always comes back to systems, processes, just sort of like organization, right? And like I'm super grateful for all of that. You know, and it's too bad that it also just comes with all this like bullshit as well. But like calendar is really important, right? And effective communication. And these are all these things that you can learn like literally on the job. But there's also just a lot of like bad habits that you pick up from being like a corporate cog, I think.
Totally. And one thing that I've learned that you don't need is all these goddamn meetings. Like there was
seriously.
meetings for a meeting. Like, you know what I mean? Like you'd have this meeting and they'd be like, okay, let's get together and you know, break off and have a meeting to discuss what we just discussed. It's like,
dude, I would literally have meetings with my team to help them prepare and practice for the actual meeting. I have to tell you, I know, right? I have to tell you that like working for myself, I'm like, whoa, I can get so much stuff done in one day because I don't have all these dumb meetings. It's amazing. It's amazing. I know. I feel like I was telling a friend, I was like, you know, I never realized how much time I spent at work just like literally doing nothing because I was in yet another meeting until I didn't work in an environment like that anymore. And I was like, oh, I literally just work now. I'm not like hanging out being bored at another meeting. It's amazing. Let's take a moment to thank some of the incredible small businesses who keep Clotheshorse going via their generous Patreon support. Selena Sanders, a social impact brand that specializes in upcycle clothing using only reclaimed, vintage, or thrifted materials from tea towels, linens, blankets, and quilts. Sustainably crafted in Los Angeles, each piece is designed to last in one's closet for generations to come. Maximum style, minimal carbon footprint. Shift Clothing out of beautiful Astoria, Oregon, with a focus on natural fibers, simple hardworking designs, and putting fat people first. Discover more at shiftwheeler.com. Late to the party, creating one-of-a-kind statement clothing from vintage, salvaged, and thrifted textiles. They hope to tap into the dreamy memories we all hold. Floral curtains, a childhood dress, the wallpaper in your best friend's rec room, all while creating modern, sustainable garments that you'll love wearing and have for years to come. Late to the Party is passionate about celebrating and preserving textiles, the memories they hold, and the stories they have yet to tell. Check them out on Instagram at Late to the Party People. Vino Vintage, based just outside of LA. We love the hunt of shopping secondhand because you never know what you might find. Catch us at flea markets around Southern California by following us on Instagram at vino.vintage so you don't miss our next event. Dylan Page is an online clothing and lifestyle brand based out of St. Louis, Missouri. Our products are chosen with intention for the conscious community. Everything we carry is animal-friendly, ethically made, sustainably sourced, and cruelty-free. Dylan Page is for those who never stop questioning where something comes from. We know that personal experience dictates what's sustainable for you, and we are here to help guide and support you to make choices that fit your needs. Check us out at dylanpage.com and find us on Instagram at dylanpage life and style. Salt Hats, purveyors of truly sustainable hats, hand-blocked, sewn, and embellished in Detroit, Michigan. Find us on Instagram at Salt Hats. Gentle Vibes Vintage. We are purveyors of polyester and psychedelic relics. We encourage experimentation and play not only in your wardrobe, but in your home too. We have thousands of killer vintage pieces ready for their next adventure. See them all on Instagram at Gentle Vibes Vintage. Thumbprint is Detroit's only fair trade marketplace, located in the historic Eastern Market. Our small business specializes in products handmade by empowered women in South Africa, making a living wage, creating things they love like hand-painted candles and ceramics. We also carry a curated assortment of sustainable and natural locally made goods. Thumbprint is a great gift destination for both the special people in your life and for yourself. Browse our online store at thumbprintdetroit.com and find us on Instagram at thumbprintdetroit. Vagabond Vintage DTLV is a vintage clothing, accessories, and decor reselling business based in downtown Las Vegas, Nevada. Not only do we sell in Las Vegas, but we're also located throughout resale markets in San Francisco, as well as at a curated boutique called Lux and Ivy, located in Indianapolis, Indiana. Jessica, the founder and owner of Vagabond Vintage DTLV, recently opened the first IRL location located in the Arts District of downtown Las Vegas on August 5th. The shop has a strong emphasis on 60s and 70s garments, single-stitch tees, and dreamy loungewear. Follow them on Instagram at Vagabond Vintage DTLV and keep an eye out for their website coming fall of 2022. Okay, so you left Levi's and you went on to a startup, which is so reminiscent of like how my career path went as well. So I want to hear from you, like, what did you do at a startup and what did you think? How did it compare to the corporate environment? All that.
Yeah, I mean, I almost didn't take the gig. And the quick reason why was is I had a couple interviews up with another like denim centric company in Seattle.
Mm.
Eddie Bauer, and then in New York, and it was like New York. The New York one was like, well, we don't pay for relocation,
Oh,
and
shut
the
up.
and
Seriously.
the starting salary was like what I started out making at Levi's when I started out. And I was like, what? Okay, well, no to you. And then it was like, well, I don't want to leave San Francisco.
Right.
And my boyfriend told me about this startup that had just been like the second biggest fashion Kickstarter of all
Oh,
time. And I reached
wow.
out to them. Yeah, they had done really well, and I reached out to them to set up a meeting, and they met with me, and it was just these two dudes, and it was a very awkward meeting, partly because like I'm an slightly anxious person, and they were just like very awkward, and
Sounds great. I love an awkward
oh.
interviewer. That's great.
It was like I showing my portfolio and I could tell that they just didn't care, and like, handing out my resume and like, we don't do paper. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing all the wrong things.
Oh,
And
geez.
we just like parted ways, and I didn't hear from them, and I reached back out, and they were busy, and they said they would get back to me, which always is like, well, that's a
Yep,
no,
that's it. It's over. Yeah.
and it's over. And I reached out again and was like, okay, look, I will work for you for free for 2 weeks, unpaid, just like,
Wow.
let's see if it's like, a match, and we can take it from there. And they let time go by a little bit longer, and I was like, all right, well, I'm not gonna reach out to them again. And they ended up reaching out and were like, hey, we're going to take you up on your offer. And I was like, oh shit. Okay. So
By the way, I just have to interrupt here and say I do not advise doing this for anyone else.
oh no, like I don't either, because like people will take advantage of you,
Yes, ding, ding, ding.
and everyone's time is valuable. And you know, I worked an entire summer for free when I interned, and
Right.
like that is now illegal. So that should tell you that like, no, nobody should ever have to work for free. But I was desperate, and
I hear
they,
you.
at the time, you know, and
Yeah.
I thought, well, you know what, free like is free, and they'll like this. And I don't know, I think it was a combination of desperation, stupidity, and also just like confidence as well, because
Mm-hmm.
I was confident that like I'm gonna get in there, and yeah, sure, I'll do it 2 weeks for free, but like they're gonna end up keeping me, you know. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
know it, but I agree with you. Don't advise it either. um and so I mean, I it was very different going from Levi's to this like bootstrappy, working out of a friend's apartment, um, writing responses to customer service emails and
Oof.
schlepping packages to the post office. And like, and I mean like massive bags of stuff to the post office. It wasn't just like a package here or there. So it was very different. And so I was like, wait, what am I doing? This is like, what, like, cool. It's kind of in my wheelhouse in that it's jeans, but like, when am I going to start doing, you know, cool things, you know?
Yeah, right.
And, and so, you know, eventually it turned into production management. The factory was right down the street from where we were located in San Francisco. And so I was visiting the factory daily, checking on like production, and then it evolved into designing as well as production management. I never lost the production management piece, but I got to help design new products. Um, so it was it was wild because it, eh, you know, there was no HR. There was no real like game plan aside from like make more money than last month. You know, like
Yeah.
it was, and make sure that like customers get their products in the time frame that, you know, we said that they would be there. And yeah, so it I was the I guess technically like first like salaried hire, but I was like fourth hire, including the two founders.
Okay.
So it was very small, um, very scrappy. I was hourly for a really long time and had to like fight to get a salary, and then fight to get health insurance. And it was, yeah, it was just so like, it was fun, but then it was very dysfunctional, and it was very inappropriate. And like, I was the only woman at the company, and I
Oof.
always thought, oh, well, I'm one of the guys, you know,
That's the
like
worst.
yeah, it is.
It's the
Because
worst. Yeah.
for me, I convinced myself that a lot of shit was okay, that
Mm-hmm.
really was not. And I told myself that because I was one of the guys, like, just, well, this is cool. Just be cool with it because, like, you don't want to be a
Ugh.
problem,
Yeah.
you know? And yeah, it was just, and meanwhile, I'm still a like raging alcoholic and, um, like towards the, yeah, and like even more so than Levi's, and which was already very, very bad. And they, most of, I would say over half of the people there were also were dabbling into having
Yeah,
drinking problems.
I believe it.
So, yeah.
So, how long did you stay there and why did you leave?
I was there for 3.5 years,
Wow, that's a
and
long time to be dealing
yeah.
with all of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it towards the end, like we moved from, we were working out of one of the founders went to high school with a woman who, who like, so, okay, the founder, the founder's wife went to high school with this guy and he was letting us, work out of his apartment. And I was like, you guys, like, we've overstayed our welcome. We need to go. And sure enough, within a month of me, like, squawking at them about this, he kicked us out. So we found a apartment right down the hall, not to make things awkward. We found an apartment right down the hall and
Right.
set up shop there. And then we moved to another apartment in San Francisco, and we're there for like a year. And then one day we showed up, and they're like, "We're moving to Berkeley in less than 2 weeks." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So now I got a commute on my hands. So I had to take BART uh, and get off from there and walk a mile to get to this new office. And I was like, man, this sucks. And
Yeah,
at
this
this
does
point,
suck.
oh, it sucked so bad. And at this point, the founders had just stopped coming into the office. And
Great.
so they were like, no, like, hey, we'll only be there Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It was just like a surprise if they showed up. And this wasn't, because we weren't coming into the office. We were. And so then by the time the Berkeley office came about, they just weren't at all. And, I would even make comments like, why aren't you coming in? Are you coming in anymore? Like, what's going on? And they didn't like that. And then I just started to not come in all that often either. I was like, well, whatever. I'll only come in if I have to like take photos of something or.
Mm-hmm.
And um, then one day I showed up and nobody was there except for the two founders. And we had a meeting with this denim mill that we were developing a custom denim with, that I was developing a custom denim with for them. And they left, and then it was just us three, and they laid me off. And I was
Wow.
like, I was just I was shocked. Like I didn't see it coming, but at the same time, like things were just weird. So yeah, they laid me off, and then within like, I don't know, 6 months, they laid another the other one of the other guys off, and then another guy like right at the beginning, I guess, of the pandemic. And like last I heard, it's just like three of them.
Oh, wow. So they're
um
still around.
yeah, they're still
Wow.
around. And at the end of the day, I think that they just were laying everyone off because they just wanted more money. They didn't want to have to pay salaries, and they were just gonna kind of do plug in the same old, and just we're happy to just kind of glide instead of, I mean, who knows? Like, I have no idea what their financials look like, but they're still around, so that says something.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, so it was yeah, it was shocking to
Yeah.
say the least.
Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
here it is. You're two fashion jobs deep. Well, three if you count working at Lamb. What did you do now?
So now I was burnt out, like completely burnt out from fashion. I was like, fuck fashion. It has given me nothing but problems and grief. And I wanted to pivot, and I wanted to pivot into the only thing I could think I could, which was like some sort of like project management. And
Mm-hmm.
so I worked at a like startup that was basically setting up Airbnbs all across the country, but using like high end kind of like, furniture and finishes and all these like fancy things. So I was like moving into like seven um, apartments at a time, and all of the planning for that went into getting everything ordered, and flying to all these different cities, and um, that proved to not be great for the alcoholism either. Basically, nothing. I was going to find a way, I think, to just stay deep into my addiction. And I was there, and then they laid off our entire team. And I was like, holy smokes, what am I going to do now? And I spent kind of like 3 months just boozing and dog sitting, and finally was like, I gotta go to rehab. I gotta
Yeah.
go. Like, if I don't go, this, like, nothing is going to change. Like, sure, all these things have happened around me, but at the same time, I have not been like the best that I could be to handle them, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Um, and so, yeah, I went to outpatient rehab, and I got like a gig that lasted like 2 months, and I like immediately saw red flags and was just like, nope, bye, gotta go. And then I was like, you know what, let's take it easy. And I decided to intern for a designer based out of here in San Francisco that is in leather goods. And I learned leather making for a hot minute, and it was fun, and it was
Mm-hmm.
uh is different, and I got to, I felt like I was using, because I was using my hands to create something, instead of like clicking away on a computer. And sure, like it can be tactile sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
fashion, touching fabrics and whatnot, but like learning a like new skill was cool. And then the pandemic hit. And then
Cool.
and then I
Everyone's
and then
favorite.
I
Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say, and then I think everybody was like, what the fuck am I doing? What am I going to do? What should I do?
Right.
And I obviously I wasn't going in to do leather working, so I was on unemployment, and that's when it kind of hit, like, okay, I never thought that I could do my own thing before,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm getting closer now to thinking that I might actually be able to. And um, I started out slow, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna start selling mask necklaces on Etsy during the pandemic, where I would like bead these like literal like lanyard things that, were made out of pearls and all this stuff for masks. And I was like, this will just be my like intro into like what it's like to have a business.
I mean, honestly,
Which is
though, like those mask lanyards are like such a life upgrade. Just saying. Like, there was a need for them for sure. Like, I remember when I got my
there
first one, I
was.
was like, this is great. Like, I'm not taking this off and like stuffing it in my pocket anymore. And like, I'm not losing my mask. Like, this is, especially in the like, when we were all using fabric masks, like, it was just like, this is an amazing invention. So you were doing a really important service, but just hearing the phrase mask lanyard immediately puts me like, it's like I've time traveled. Like, it's a phrase I haven't thought of for so long, but when we were moving, I came across some of my mask lanyards and I was like, oh, I need to hold on to these.
Yeah, I've got a whole box of them still. um, but one day we'll see. I'll give them to my mom to repurpose into jewelry or something. She's a jewelry maker, but like, yeah, I for some reason thought that like it would be a intro, and it literally was just like something for me to do because there wasn't much that I could do even if I wanted to start the business at the beginning of the pandemic because I wasn't gonna be able to like go anywhere and like talk to people about anything, whether it be like buying fabric or making something. So um I toyed around with the idea and I got down to like what it is that I believe in, what it is that I think is missing, and the things that like I think are wrong with um, this industry. And um, the more I sat on it and kind of realized this company, the more I was like, oh my gosh, I believe in this. And the more I believed in it and talked about it, um, the more I was like finding other people believing in it. And I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going to do this.
Uh-huh.
I, I, it was, it was kind of wild, how it came about. Just friends who had really good tech jobs that, their company was bought and, made some decent money being like, we'll invest. And I was like, oh my God, is
That's
this happening? And
amazing.
it's amazing. And I understand absolutely the privilege that comes along with um, knowing and being surrounded by people that were in tech that are one of the few, many, however you want to put it, that have like done well, and to know them and be friends with them, and but also to have the opportunity to be able to start this thing because it wasn't happening for
Hmm.
if it were just me. Because I to this day am broker than broke. So yeah, and so I started, and it was like doing the LLC and trademarking and like all these like quote unquote easy paperworky things initially, but then it like soon turned into holy smokes, like I there's just so many things that um I just didn't think about that I would be doing, everything from buying fabric to figuring out like a whole pattern maker situation, and like I'm on my like third factory, and just a lot of different relationships to
Hmm.
manage
Yeah, for
that
sure.
that are just wild.
I mean, I think like, being a small business owner, no matter what you do, is way more complicated than I think outsiders know. But I can say specifically when we're talking about like in the world of like clothing or accessories or shoes, it is even more difficult because it's not like you can just say like, hey, I want this thing, and then it just gets made, because there are so many ways in which, especially like denim where you are, where it can go wrong. But clothing in general, you've got to think about fabric and fit, and it has to be sewn properly, and like the right trims have to be there, and it has to be in a price point that you can afford, in a quantity that you can afford. And it is more than just like you get up and you take pictures of cute outfits and put them on the internet, and then people show up and buy things from you. Like it's really, really hard.
It is. It's like so hard. And I thought I was kind of like presented with this idea. So the factory that I helped find for my previous job, I went to him and was like, "Hey, I want to start my own thing. Can you help me?" And he's like, "Absolutely." And I was working with him and he's like, "Okay, well, I've got this pattern maker. So just, as you've spoken about before, like you don't just create a pattern out of thin air. You start from a base kind of like style and then
Mm-hmm.
you tweak it to make it your own." And he's like, "Just send me a sample, I'll make a pattern. We'll make it from your fabric, and then any tweaks you take photos of, pin the garment, send it back to me." And I was like, "Oh, this is like way better than me having to like fly back and forth to LA. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is sure, let's do it." And then like it was, I soon realized that this is like playing telephone in a way.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a good way to describe
you know,
it.
oh, it turned into a nightmare. And then I would like, I would tell him like, "Okay, we're good. Let's grade the pattern and let's, oh, but I want to do this other fabric." Like it was like a lot of mistakes that I made, but a lot of stuff that him as like, someone that's been in this for umpteen years, to be like, "No, just like, let's hold off and, whatever." Well, what ended up happening is I was like, "Okay, I need to put something out. I got to launch with something because I've been
Mhm.
doing this now for, a while. And so let's launch with some tote bags and I'll, start to get the name out there, whatever." And so I did the one thing that I said I wasn't going to do at the beginning of this, which was pre-order, like make a bunch of product. Like I set out that I want to make things to order. But I thought, I don't know, it was so weird. I was like, "No, these are gonna sell like hotcakes." And I made I made these tote bags, and they came back, and I was going through them, QCing them, and I was like, "Oh, well, this one's bad," and like put it down. And I start going through, and I was like,
Oh
oh my
no,
God,
I'm getting this sense
they're
of
all
dread. I
bad.
know this dread too well.
Oh, oh, they were all bad. I stopped after 50. I like numbered them all and taped up all the things that were wrong. And I just stopped at 50. I was like, "I'm not going through all like 200 of these bags. Like, this is ridiculous." So I shipped them all back. And then on Instagram, I got a comment on the tote bags, a photo of one of the tote bags. It was in Spanish, and so I translated it, and it was like, "Oh, it was my pleasure sewing these bags." And I was like, "Oh, one of the." I was like, well, first I was like, "Oh, you're the one that sewed these messed up tote bags." And then I was like, "Oh, like he's being very sweet. Let's talk to him." So I brought it over to the DMs and we like carried on this conversation. And then I come to find out that this guy was sewing them by himself at his home, and he was being paid by the piece.
No. Okay, can you explain to people why that's a problem?
Oh, it's a huge problem. Number one, it's illegal. And number
Yep.
two, like, it's illegal because what it does is it promotes this mentality of you work, work, work as fast as you can so that you can get paid. Otherwise, you don't, if you take, 2 hours to sew one tote bag, well, you're only getting paid for that one. So it promotes this idea that you need to work fast as you can, and for as long as you can in order to get paid a
Yep.
decent wage. And so it's illegal, and you are now paid hourly, because that is just what is right. And so I, one, was like pissed off because he outsourced this
Yeah.
without like telling me, and two, was doing it illegally, and three, it's just not ethical. I mean,
No.
that is number one. Like, it's just not ethical, and I don't want to be associated with that. So it was hard because like I didn't know what to do. I was like, well, I gotta talk to this guy, the factory owner, about it because it's not okay. But I also don't want to get this guy in trouble.
Right.
Like, so it was this weird, like, messed up, like, I didn't know what to do. And so I, of course, ended up scorching earth and went down to LA and just showed up and was like, I want all my stuff. And at first, he kind of was like, hey, do we have something on the calendar? And I was like,
Oh
oh God.
man.
And he's like, and then he soon realized that no, this is bad. And I was like, I want all my fabric. I want all my hardware. I want all of my leather patches. I want, and he was like, no, you can't take it. You can't take it because you haven't paid me. And I go, you mean the 200 bags that were effed up that I sent back? I go, I have never not paid you. I'm not going to start now, but I am taking my stuff. And this is me by myself. And this is like, only men, again, only men, and I bring that up because like it's hard being a woman in this business.
Yeah.
Like it is difficult on so many different levels, but when you're face to face with, guys that are like bigger than you, like it's scary. And so I took all my shit, loaded it in this SUV that I rented, and um, you know, basically waited it out until he sent me stuff that and I told him, I was like, I know that these weren't made here at the factory, like where we are standing right now. And so yeah, it was just this whole back and forth, a lot of gaslighting, um, a lot of, and then it turned into threats. If you talk shit to anybody, I will make sure that you never have anything produced in LA ever again.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you like what you'd learned the hard way. uh, I feel like this is probably somewhere here. There's something you learned the hard way.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned so many things the hard way. Um, I learned that like until you are really big, like you need to stay involved with as much as
Mm-hmm.
possible,
Yeah.
and have feet on the ground and eyes on everything as much as possible. You cannot take anybody's word even if like I had a relationship, like a working relationship that predated like 2 years prior to me working with him for a year. So I had 3 years that I trusted this guy. Like sure they were kind of chaotic, but like I trusted them. And yeah, it's just don't um just always be involved. I always be involved at every step. And it's hard because like you need to be able to trust who you're working with. So you can't accuse anybody of anything, or you know what I mean? Like so there's like a fine line of just making sure that you see everything every step of the way. Um but also I don't know. I'm sure there's things I could have done better so that maybe he didn't think it was okay to like also treat me the way that he did.
Hmm.
Maybe I should have put my foot down a little firmer, a little sooner. But then again, like now maybe that's some sort of like victim complex that I've got going on, like maybe I don't give myself enough credit that like I was okay and he was shitty. Um, it's hard. Like it's hard even now to try and like decipher that. But at the end of the day, I think it was best for me to have left and moved on.
I mean, this guy didn't share your values, right?
Oh,
And he wasn't being a good partner to you. And I think it can be, especially when you're a small business, you feel like you don't have the freedom or the luxury of ending those relationships because you don't know where else you're going to be able to go. And so I think there's something really brave about saying I'm going to leave this situation anyway.
yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny because it's almost like Levi's in a sense, right? And I was like, I gotta fucking go. I gotta go now. um, but in a very different capacity, and yeah, it was scary, and I didn't know where I was gonna go, and um, the second place it was better than the first in many ways, but then it wasn't because they weren't able to actually like sew things to spec. And, when I pushed back on that, then they just dropped me. So I was like, oh my God, on to the third. So yeah, so now I'm at my third slash fourth. I've got two factories now currently, and um, they don't really communicate unless I'm down there, which means that I am down there every. This is the longest break I've taken since I started doing this, but I've been going down every 3 weeks, and um, it's exhausting. But I have to do it because I had contracted a production manager to kind of be my eyes, and that ended up turning bad too.
Oh
And
my gosh.
it just ended up becoming very obvious that it was a money grab. And
Oh man, I knew you were going to say that.
oh,
I knew you were going to say that.
oh, it was the
Yeah.
worst.
It's funny. I mean, like something I I mean, maybe people who aren't small business owners are not unaware of this, but there are just so many people out there who really take advantage of and exploit small business owners, and like they're maybe like their blind spots or their the fact that it's like one person running a business. And I talk about this all the time with my friend Kim, how there are so many people working out there in the space of supporting small business owners in one way or another who are scamming them, are like taking their money, making a lot of promises that they're never going to deliver, and then doing nothing, or disappointing them, or like really hurting these businesses in the first place. Like even when I was working for the smallest startup that I worked for, we were constantly hiring these like consultants and contractors who would like take a bunch of money from us and then literally do nothing. And it made me very wary of that kind of stuff. I could name so many examples in which we paid someone all this money. They didn't do what they were said they were going to do. And then suddenly it would be like, hey, Amanda, can you just do this thing now? We're scrambling because we told the board that we were going to do it. And now it's not done. And I still see that happening with so many of my friends who are small business owners, like these sketchy people. I mean, honestly, I get like emails every day from similar people who would like to take my money like via Clotheshorse, like promising me like followers and listeners and SEO and like who knows what else. Like it's a whole small business scamming industrial complex out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with my situation, it was because this person realized that I was very much reliant on
Oh, I
her,
hate
you know?
this.
Like it then they
Yeah.
just kind of yeah, it just wasn't a good was not a good thing. But I learned again. I learned with which was my like advice earlier is that like I got to do the thing. Like I'm not,
Yeah.
to the point where I that it was warranted. I think I was just, trying to save myself a trip every month down when in actuality like it's just what I have to do, not only to keep my own sanity, but like for the business, to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
everything is, being made the way that I want and by people who are treated well and like it's just better this way for now. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you like what you would like to do better. I guess that's one part of it. Like, kind of I mean, for lack of a better term, micromanaging everything right
yeah,
now.
yeah.
But like what else do you see as like things you want to improve or you want to learn or you just want to do better?
I mean, honestly, I would very much like to be more organized, just more.
I feel
Oh,
that. I
I,
feel that
I feel
strongly.
like you though are very organized. So I don't know. I'm and like I don't mean to put any type of like put you in any type of bucket, but like I just get the sense that you are pretty organized and maybe don't give yourself enough credit. Um,
That could be true. I'm more organized than my husband. I will say, like, we work across the hallway from one another and we both are like, freelancers. And I see that it's because corporations have taught me to create a lot of spreadsheets. Like,
yes.
honestly, like that's why. But I still feel like for me, I'm like, oh, if I just had like 5 more hours in a week where I would just be like organizing things, I would feel less anxious. But like that would mean at this point giving up important things like sleeping or eating or
Yeah. Yeah,
hygiene.
we can't give those
But I
things
do
up.
I do wish. Yeah, I do wish for that. I'm like, oh, because I have to, I have worked with people over the years whose level of organization like almost frightened me. Um, Even though like I wouldn't say that they were necessarily like doing a better job than me. I specifically had someone on my team once who seemed hyper organized, but I often wonder now if it's just because she wore a blazer every day. But I would always think like, oh, she must think I'm so chaotic, but I don't have a blazer. So I don't know. It's just like funny. I'm always like, I could be better. I think a lot of us suffer from that.
Yes. Yeah. No, organization, I think I would love to do better at. I'd love to be able to plan better, which again is part of organizational
Mm-hmm.
things. I need to be better at social media. I'm
Ugh.
so bad at it. I don't post often. I have a thing about getting in front of the camera and trying to like talk to people, or my followers. I'm just so just I and I know that it's part of the gig, like, or at least ways in this day and age it is. Like I just wish that I was better at that. And I need to I'd like to just be a little more confident in what I'm doing, because I am in many ways, but I think I have a problem with like second guessing, and um, I just
Mm-hmm.
need to just forge ahead um, and be okay with the mistakes, because um, mistakes happen and you learn from them and then you move forward. But I'm just so freaked out about making a mistake that, like, then I just don't
Yeah.
make any. And if you don't make any, you're not doing anything. So, yeah, yeah, so many things.
I mean, I will say, like, when I'm talking with small business owners, like whether they're my clients or people that I've worked with via Small Biz Big Pick, I think that, like, the second guessing ourselves, the imposter syndrome of it all, the fear of making a mistake is like what holds so many of us back. And I remember having a conversation with someone once, like, hey, have you ever met anybody who didn't have imposter syndrome? and, and then it's like, oh, wait, yeah, I remember that person or that person. And I was like, wow, they must be like so liberated that they never are like, what if this is wrong? What if I mess this up? What if I'm not doing the best that I could do? But like, that's a real mindset that people have. And I think it's really impossible when you are your own worst critic to fully delete that from your brain. That's just how you're always going to be. But I do think that with some work, you can minimize that voice a little bit. I
Yeah.
like that's the only advice I can give. But like everything you just said, I've heard the same things from so many people, and it feels so unfair that like so many of us who are like talented, really capable people with a lot to offer the world are sitting around being like, oh man, like too bad I suck, or what if I mess up, or just, like it's just too bad. I can't give you much advice about social media because it sucks. And
You're so good at it
I
though.
mean,
Oh, you're so good at it. Like
here's what I'll say.
go ahead.
There was definitely a time where I was flying high on Instagram, like a lot of people, but like now Instagram barely shows my posts to any of my followers, period. So
I still see
well, that's
them.
good because a lot of people don't. And I am currently very fretful that no one knows that the Clotheshorse Jamboree tickets go on sale tomorrow because it's been showing my post to like 5 people. So that'll be interesting. But I will tell you, we're not the only people who feel stressed about social media because like every time I open Threads, that's like 99% of the posts. So yeah. Today I read this thing was like, here's what you should do to make Instagram like you. And I was like, this is all such nonsense. Like, I don't know. Anyway, that's a
Yeah.
whole other thing. If you're enjoying this episode, then this is a great time to remind you that my work here at Clotheshorse is made possible by the support of listeners like you, just like NPR, and these great small businesses. Please go give them your support. Blank Cass, or Blanket Coats by Cass, is focused on restoring, renewing, and reviving the history held within vintage and heirloom textiles. By embodying the love, craft, and energy that is original to each vintage textile as I transfer it into a new garment, I hope we can reteach ourselves to care for and mend what we have and make it last. Blank Cass lives on Instagram at blank_Cass, and a website will be launched soon at blankcass.com. decodenim.com. Located in Whistler, Canada, Velvet Underground is a velvet jungle full of vintage and secondhand clothing, plants, a vegan cafe, and lots of rad products from other small sustainable businesses. Our mission is to create a brand and community dedicated to promoting self-expression, as well as educating and inspiring a more sustainable and conscious lifestyle, both for the people and the planet. Find us on Instagram at shop_velvetunderground or online at www.shopvelvetunderground.com. St. Evens is a New York City-based vintage shop that is dedicated to bringing you those special pieces you'll reach for again and again. More than just a store, St. Evens is dedicated to sharing the stories and history behind the garments. 10% of all sales are donated to a different charitable organization each month. New vintage is released every Thursday at wearstevens.com with previews of new pieces and more brought to you on Instagram at wear_st.evens. That's Wear St. Evens. Country Feedback is a mom and pop record shop in Tarboro, North Carolina. They specialize in used rock, country, and soul and offer affordable vintage clothing and housewares. Do you have used records you want to sell? Country Feedback wants to buy them. Find us on Instagram at Country Feedback Vintage and Vinyl, or head down east and visit our brick and mortar. All are welcome at this inclusive and family-friendly record shop in the country. Republica Unicornia Yarns. Handmade yarn and notions for the color obsessed. Made with love and some swearing in fabulous Atlanta, Georgia by head yarn wench Kathleen. Get ready for rainbows with a side of giving a damn. Republica Unicornia is all about making your own magic using small batch, responsibly sourced, hand-dyed yarns and thoughtfully made notions. Slow fashion all the way down and discover the joy of creating your very own beautiful hand-knit, crocheted, or woven pieces. Find us on Instagram at Republica_Unicornia_yarns and at www.republicaunicornia.com. Picnic Wear, a slow fashion brand ethically made by hand from vintage and dead stock materials, most notably vintage towels. Founder Danny has worked in the industry as a fashion designer for over 10 years, but started Picnic Wear in response to her dissatisfaction with the industry's shortcomings. Picnic Wear recently moved to rural North Carolina, where all their sewing and accessories are now designed and cut, but the majority of their sewing is done by skilled garment workers in New York City. Their customers take comfort in knowing that all their sewists are paid well above New York City minimum wage. Picnic Wear offers minimal waste and maximum authenticity. Future vintage over future garbage. Cute Little Ruin is an online shop dedicated to providing quality vintage and secondhand clothing, vinyl, and home items in a wide range of styles and price points. If it's ethical and legal, we try to find a home for it. Vintage style with progressive values. Find us on Instagram at Cute Little Ruin. Is there a little bit of Italy in your soul? Are you an enthusiast of pre-loved decor and accessories? Bring vintage Italian style and history into your space with the Pewter Thimble. We source useful and beautiful things and mend them where needed. We also find gorgeous illustrations and make them print-worthy. Tarot cards, tea towels, and hand-picked treasures available to you from the comfort of your own home. Responsibly sourced from across Rome, lovingly renewed by fairly paid artists and artisans, with something for every budget. Discover more at thepewterthimble.com. Deco Denim is a startup based out of San Francisco, and it sells clothing and accessories that are sustainable, gender fluid, size inclusive, and high quality, made to last for years to come. Deco Denim is trying to change the way you think about buying clothes. Founder Sarah Mattis wants to empower people to ask important questions like, where was this made? Was this garment made ethically? Is this fabric made of plastic? Can this garment be upcycled? And if not, can it be recycled? Sign up at decodenim.com to receive $20 off your first purchase. They promise not to spam you and send out no more than 3 emails a month, with 2 of them surrounding education or a personal note from the founder. Again, that's decodenim.com. Okay. Well, so here's my last question for you. And this is okay. Well, there are two questions that I get all the time via DMs and via emails. The first one is, where can I buy ethical underwear? And I still don't have a lot of answers there for anyone. But the other one I get that is actually even harder to answer than where to get ethical underwear, believe it or not, is I work in fashion right now. How do I get out? And what do I do next? Like, what's your advice? And I always kind of get stumped here because there is no like one size fits all. Well, there's no one size fits all clothing either, but there's definitely no one size fits all for how you get out of fashion, because I've seen people play it out in a lot of different ways. And in my experience, it's really hard. What would you tell people if they asked you that question?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. And yeah, it's so nuanced depending on, background and like the support systems that you have. And there's a financial piece to it. But I, I would say, have like if you're already starting to feel like you want to get out now, start that safety net, start squirreling away anything and everything that you can. I would say explore what it is that you're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And, whether that be like brainstorming or watching, videos on subjects that pique your interest and something that maybe you'd want to transition into. And then I would say, like, oh, so bad, but like open up the dreaded LinkedIn and start like finding people in those industries that you're or someone that inspires you, and just like reach out. You'd be surprised by how many people are still on that platform, but like you'd be surprised by how many people will actually take you up on a Zoom meeting, or will even respond back to an email, and like pick brains, get on Reddit, get into subreddits
Mm-hmm.
about these discussions about the field that you'd like to see yourself in. Like, do all of the kind of investigative like journalism that you need to do to really kind of like pump yourself up about going where it is that you want to be, because it's now more than ever. What's wild is that it's possible. It's absolutely possible. I think it was much harder. Like I think of 2012 when I left Levi's. Like it was not that easy to just kind of like pivot. We were still very much in this world of you need to stay at a company as long as possible to
Yeah.
show that like, and now it's not rare to be someplace for like 6 months and just bounce. So, yeah, do your research, do your homework, and save up as much as you possibly can. Um, and if you can, like therapy, therapy is amazing.
You know, if you have the privilege of being able to go to therapy, it will help a lot. And I think that
Yes.
we need to get more comfortable with recognizing that your job might make you need therapy to deal with it, and that's okay. Not
Yep.
that I mean that means that, oh, if you have a bad job, you'll be able to stick it out by going to therapy, but recognizing that there is trauma that comes from jobs that if possible needs therapy. Like, you need to get therapy to work through it if you can, because I think like the first time I heard a friend of mine saying that they were basically going to therapy to deal with their job. Well, first off, I was like, okay, that's really fucked up. I want you to quit. But the job, not therapy. But secondly, I was like, oh my God, did I just hear someone say out loud that they are getting therapy for their job? Like, this, we need to talk about this more. Like, job trauma
Yeah.
is real.
Absolutely. And I wish I had started it so much sooner so I could have like started unpacking all
Yeah.
of my
Yeah.
traumas. Um, instead of like now, yeah, but yes, if you have the means, I'm assuming that if you're in like a fashion gig, like you said, that is that is requiring that you basically go to therapy, that it is helpful tool. But yeah.
I mean, like, I have had a lot of friends since then who are also in therapy to deal with their job. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad that you're getting the therapy while you're at the job and still have health insurance. But like, I hope that the culmination of this whole thing is that you leave that job.
Yeah.
The thing I can't underscore enough based on my experience is that leaving fashion is it's going to be scary and it's not going to be easy, but there will come a moment where you're going to be glad that you did it. I get emails all the time from people who I feel their fear because I've been there too, where what they're really looking for is some easy transition into a new job or a new career path where there'll be no time in between where you're worrying about money or how you're going to pay your rent or how you're going to have health insurance. It'll just be this like easy transition. And unfortunately, like that's not a path that most of us are going to get. Like it is going to be scary and hard in between. I also get emails from people pretty regularly who think that I was able to leave the fashion industry because I have a podcast. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I still have to work. Like this is not, you're not going to be able to leave the fashion industry and move into a podcast and make a living either. But I also think like you're probably not going to be just slide into a small business immediately either. Like it's going to be a process and it's going to be scary, but it will be worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm, still in the fashion industry, but like I'm just beyond grateful that the only stress that I have is mostly created by me.
Which is amazing.
um, I mean, obviously there's some, yeah, yeah, but and obviously there are other outside forces that help along with that. But I'm this. I would much prefer this type of stress than the politics or you know bouts of sexual harassment or like I am very grateful that I get to depict how I want it to be as much as I have control over. And I wouldn't trade it for anything else, honestly. So just take the jump.
But no, it'll be scary and that's okay.
Absolutely. Embrace the fear.
Embrace the fear. I like that because I got to say for me, leaving the industry was really, really scary. I have no regrets. And I think that's the really important part that like sometimes the most important, most beneficial decisions are going to seem really terrifying or the path forward isn't going to seem easy, or maybe you can't even see the path forward. But I promise that there will be a moment where you look back and you're just so glad. Just so glad.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. This was such a delight. Thanks to Sarah for spending some time with us, sharing her stories. I hope that it resonated with you because maybe it got you thinking about what you could do next, unless, of course, you're super happy and content with your job right now, which is awesome. Congratulations. Maybe you'll be able to share Sarah's story with someone else who is looking for a change because we always have a friend, right, who is looking for a change but is super scared or doesn't know where to begin. I have been that friend. I have had those friends. I have those friends right now. Perhaps you can give some advice after hearing what Sarah had to say today. If you specifically have left fashion and want to share your story for a future episode, drop me a line via email. That's amanda@clotheshorse.world. Like I said, I don't want to share these stories every week, but I want to share them periodically because I do think they have so much value. Don't forget to give Sarah a follow on Instagram. I'll share all of her information in the show notes. And the last thing I'll say here before we end this episode, I want you to never forget that the personal is political, meaning your personal stories and experiences not only shape your own views and values, sharing them can help others understand your views and values and maybe even open their eyes to something new and important. You might think that that one bad job you had is depressing or embarrassing, but it actually matters. And sharing it with others might actually help them see what's wrong with their current workplace or recognize that they deserve better or even motivate them to make a change. I mean, it could get them involved in like organizing their workplace to unionize or fighting for workers' rights. There are so many great things that can come out of sharing your stories, even stories that have nothing to do with work. I believe that sometimes we have to hear other people's stories in order to fully see and understand our lives. I was talking recently with friend of the pod, Susan Massey, and she mentioned how much she loves reading memoirs. And I was like, oh my God, me too. I mean, people have shamed me for this in the past, not for a long time, because, mostly I just hang out with Justin. But I remember being younger. For many of you who are assigned female at birth, this will feel like a familiar story. Dudes in my life, of course, would want to pick apart the music I listened to, the movies I loved, the books I loved, right? And there were several men in my life who would shame me for my love of biographies and autobiographies. Like I wasn't reading real literature. And I would always feel like it was this guilty pleasure, but I just really loved reading about other people's lives. And, talking about it with Susan just reminded me of how that's still like one of my favorite things to hear about and read about. We both agreed that learning other people's stories has helped us cope with trauma, even sort of like release the shame that often comes with trauma. And this is so random, but I remember, and I was telling Susan about this, I remember reading back in like 2000 that musician Elliott Smith, one of my all-time favorites, seriously, if you've never listened to Elliott Smith and specifically his album Either Or, you should go do it right now. Anyway, Elliott Smith was a survivor of child abuse. And learning that in 2000, when I was so young and my abusive childhood was not really in my rear view very much, right? It was still very, very close. It made me feel so much stronger and less ashamed of the abuse I had experienced as a kid. I found myself thinking, well, if Elliott Smith survived this and people love him and he's so talented and special, then I'm okay too. And it wasn't my fault that happened to me. Now, not every story that inspires and motivates you or helps you see something important about yourself, not every one of those stories has to be as brutal as child abuse. It can be leaving a dumb job or trying something new and learning it the hard way. It all helps. I mean, even listening to Sarah talk about issues she had with production and what she learned from it, well, that might help someone listening to this episode who is a small business owner themselves or thinking about starting their own business. That's the thing about our experiences. No matter how mundane they might seem, they have value. And even if you have felt like people don't listen to you, which trust me, been there, and I have done that for a long time, there are awesome people who do want to listen to you. In fact, the people who don't want to listen to you, you don't need them. There's other issues going on there. The people who want to listen to you, that's your community, this community. And I've always wanted Clotheshorse to be a platform for people who are usually unheard, like myself. But my hope is that this practice of sharing our stories, of reaching others with our experiences, of bringing them in by sharing ourselves, that this extends far beyond Clotheshorse and out into the world around us. Communities and movements are built by sharing, by revealing ourselves to others. Let's keep doing it, even when it feels weird. I promise someone is listening. Thanks for listening to another episode of Clotheshorse. You know what I'm going to say. If you liked it, leave a rating, a review, subscribe, tell your friends, all the things like that. If you'd like to support my work financially, there are numerous ways you can do that. You can go to patreon.com/clotheshorse podcast. You can drop a little money in my Ko-fi. That link is in the show notes and also on my website. And, of course, you can go check out the merch. The last thing I'll just say this week, it's the same thing we say every week. Thanks, as always, to my other half, Dustin Travis White, for our music and audio support. He's literally outside right now, spray painting some secondhand wooden letters, Clotheshorse Pink, for the Jamboree. I'm really grateful. All right, I'll talk to you all next week. Bye.